and Jacqueline Bond with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad that you could make it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I would like for you to talk more about what the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council provides for victim advocates.
Well, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council was actually created back in 1981 to pull together and build consensus among the various components of the criminal justice system. One of the things that the agency does is we are over the Victims' Compensation Fund. And this is a fund that's not generated by state taxpayer dollars, but when someone is convicted of a crime and they are placed on parole or probation and the fines or fees are assessed by the court, a portion of those fees are placed into this fund to actually help victims. So if you are a victim of a violent crime in Georgia, you could be eligible for up to $25,000 in benefits, and a lot of people are not aware of this program.
So how would an individual that has been a victim of a crime contact you and apply for these services?
Well, you can go to our website, which is www.cjcc.ga.gov, and the application is very accessible right there on the website. And basically what you have to provide is a copy of the incident report, a medical bill to show that you've actually had some injury, and we would begin processing your claim.
Now, what types of crimes would be applicable under this particular fund? Is there a certain type of case, or is there certain situations?
There are. It's violent crime. It would be child molestation, aggravated assault, rape. We also actually provide payments for forensic medical exams. If you're a victim of a rape in Georgia, you should never have to pay for that rape exam. The funding for that comes directly from the fund.
Now, if an individual has been hurt in any of these particular situations and they are afraid to come forward, what should they do?
Well, the thing is this. No one has to be prosecuted necessarily for you to be eligible for the benefits of this program. What we really need, though, is for them to be able to establish that an incident happened. So it's imperative that you at least begin the application process, because we can't provide the benefits unless we have some documentation.
Okay, now you touched on the fact that these individuals don't have to report this to the police, or should they report this to the police?
There has to be some kind of incident report.
Okay.
So, yes, but because you report something doesn't necessarily mean that the district attorney's office actually goes forward and that it's prosecuted. Prosecution is not a requirement in order to be eligible for benefits. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so if an individual has been hurt and they come forward to you, how quickly are the services and resources provided to these individuals? What's the timeline here?
We typically, well, and I preface everything with it depends, because it depends on whether all the documentation is provided. It depends on whether we're able to verify the documentation that's provided. In an ideal scenario, probably anywhere from 30 to 60 days would be the turnaround in an ideal scenario.
Now, what type of services are provided in that 30 to 60 day turnaround?
Well, the fund can compensate you up to $15,000 for medical expenses. So if you have providers that submit those bills in a timely manner, you would be eligible for potentially up to $15,000. We can pay $10,000 for lost economic support. So if you're out of work and you can't go to work and you don't have benefits that compensate you while you're out as a result of this incident, up to $10,000. If you're the child or the spouse of someone who you relied on this person for benefits and they've been injured or, God forbid, killed, and we can establish that they were like the head of the household and providing, funding for the household, then you could possibly even get economic support in that instance as well. We pay up to $3,000 for counseling. We pay $1,500 for crime scene cleanup. And if your loved one is killed in connection with a violent crime, we pay up to $6,000 in funeral expenses.
Now, say for instance the individual is not working and they have no sort of economic support whatsoever or income coming in. How does this program help them get through the problems that they're having in their lives?
We only compensate if there's verifiable documentation that shows that there's a loss. We're paying for a loss.
So does this organization partner with other organizations that may support the financial expenses that are not paid for, that are left after this violent attack?
Well, our agency, not only do we handle the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, but we also provide funding for domestic violence shelters, those kinds of things.
I see. And the age groups that we're talking about here is anyone that has been a victim, and it can be a baby up to what age?
There is no limit on the age. And I will say, let me just add this one caveat. You can't be a party to the crime and then apply for benefits. In other words, it can't be like a drug deal gone bad and you get shot and then you come to say you're a victim. That we don't. That's part of the way the statute is set up.
I see. Now, can you briefly tell me a little bit about some initiatives that maybe you're working on that will satisfy some particular things like sex trafficking or some types of other violent crimes that may have not been mentioned?
Well, part of what's also housed at the agency is the Human Trafficking Task Force.
Okay.
We have a full-time employee who's basically tasked with working with a task force made up of over 100 stakeholders throughout the community who are trying to address the issue of sex trafficking. A lot of people may not know, but Georgia has been identified as a hub for the commercial sexual exploitation of children, and we are fighting very diligently to address that issue because it's just tragic.
Oh, I see. It is very tragic, and I heard a lot about this, and a lot of children are being victimized with the sex trafficking. Now, with the initiative that you have with the funding, is that funding available to everyone that applies? I think you mentioned something earlier that there is a caveat to the program, and what is that exactly?
Well, there's a deadline.
Okay.
I mean, you can't wait 20 years after the incident to apply.
Okay.
The goal, hopefully, would be to apply fairly quickly after the incident happened, and also to provide the required documentation to even begin processing the claim. And after that, if you are denied, there is an appeal process whereby there's a Victims Compensation Board that will review your appeal, and they may overturn the denial. Some of the reasons people are denied is because they file out of time, and there are sometimes very legitimate reasons why someone may not file, within 48 hours, within 6 months, or whatever. If you're injured and you're severely injured, you might be in a coma, and so if you're in a coma, realistically, you couldn't apply.
Exactly.
So.
Okay, so Dr. J. Parker Griffin, how are you this evening?
I'm doing quite well, and yourself?
Well, wonderful. I'd like for you to tell us more about the Department of Community Health and Preventive Medicine and the resources and services that are provided to victim advocates.
Okay, my name is Dr. James Parker Griffin Jr., but I go by Dr. J. Parker.
Okay.
And I am adjunct faculty at the Morehouse School of Medicine in the Department of Community Health and Preventive Medicine. So one of the things that I would like for the community to be aware of is the fact that the Morehouse School of Medicine is actually going to be doing a violence prevention summit. It's called the Daniel H. Blumenthal Public Health Violence Prevention Summit, and that's going to be taking place on April the 6th, which I believe is a Wednesday. And it's open to the public. And the purpose of the summit is to highlight tested approaches to violence prevention. But it will also deal with some intervention aspects of violence as well. So that's one of the things that I do, but I'm also a behavior therapist. I'm in private practice with Joshua Generation Caring Consultant Services. There are not many behavior therapy resources that are available, but if someone wanted to partake of behavior therapy services, which is the state-of-the-art science-based approach to dealing with trauma, they would have to go to the Psychology Today Therapist referral page and look for Dr. James Parker Griffin Jr. or Joshua Generation Caring Consultant Services. We're going to be offering a workshop on April the 28th on how to overcome emotional trauma. A lot of people don't realize that going along with violence, in the case of domestic violence, for example, there's oftentimes a lot of emotional damage that takes place. And so we're going to be talking about how people can learn to overcome the trauma of dealing with people with narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathic disorder, and psychopathic disorder. And so that can be a lifelong injury to people, and it's not something that people can easily overcome necessarily, and it can actually be as damaging or more damaging than physical violence.
I see. Well, you're covering a lot of topics here. Now, can you give us more of a definition of this behavior? How does one know that they are a candidate for those type of services?
Well, there's a lot of responses that people have. Very often, people will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of being a victim of a person with narcissistic personality disorder, for example. And so there will be sleeplessness, loss of appetite, depression, anxiety, and a response to the situation in such that the narcissist engage in what we refer to as crazy-making behavior. And so they're really into control of the victim. And so one of the things that they do is to exercise their control by making the victim think that they're crazy. They'll do things like misplace their keys or something, and when the person says, "Where's my keys?" it's like, "I don't know, what keys?" Things like that. Or just kind of downgrading the person or making them feel less than. In a domestic violence or an intimate partner relationship, oftentimes that's the kind of thing that happens, in addition to philandering, sleeping around all over the place and so on and so forth. But sometimes it'll be a parent-child relationship, and in that case, that's when you have this long-term, long-standing post-traumatic stress response. And so what we do is we teach people how to manage their thoughts in such a way that they're able to regain their sense of self.
Wow, that's a lot. Now, one of the things that I like to touch on here is your private practice and how it helps victim advocates.
Well, we're, as I say, available on the Psychology Today Therapist referral page, and we work with individuals as early as, like, say, 7 or 8, all the way up to basically the grave. But myself, I tend to focus on working with African American males. The people who are on my caseload right now range anywhere from around 17 to 48. And so what I do is I form a team with them, and I develop a comprehensive, what I refer to as a success plan. Some people call it a treatment plan, but I call it a success plan because I'm not trying to get treatment, I'm trying to get success. And so we look at all aspects of what's going on with that person's life in order to help them to move from point A to point B. Some of the situations are very heart-wrenching, I have to say, as far as their response to being survivors of abuse. And sometimes it's domestic violence. I've had women come in who have been in a conflict with a partner over a relationship issue, been together for 5 years, and they decide that they want to go check out what's this person doing, this intimate partner. And then when they get over there, they see that the intimate partner is with another female, and then that turns into on the front porch type incident, and then that turns into a hospital type visit, and then there's the emotional response to that. And so that's how we roll.
Okay. Now, does the organization provide support, financial support for individuals who cannot afford to come forward to get help from your private practice?
Well, now I have to say that typically my clients,
Yes.
they tend to be, I hate to say, well-off clients in terms of, so a lot of them, we do accept many, many, many forms of insurance. And some of them are low-income individuals like with Amerigroup or, Medicaid types of insurance. But the majority of mine are actually well off, and they are private pay. So they'll pay out of pocket at the standard, official rate. But we will help people in terms of making referrals to organizations who provide free services, and that's not a problem, because our position, first of all, we're a faith-based organization. So I'll tell my clients, first off, I'm a believer first and a scientist second, but a scientist nevertheless. And so we're not going to leave people high and dry if they make a connection with us, but we're definitely going to make sure that their needs get met in terms of the kinds of support that they need, like particularly if they're suicidal or homicidal or something like that, then we're going to connect and make a referral accordingly.
Now, with most of these individuals who are suffering from this post-traumatic stress or trauma due to childhood, it could be a personality disorder, how do they go about seeking help? Because sometimes we're in denial about who we are and what's happening in our lives, and we don't know how to communicate that to someone. So how would they go about doing that?
Well, the most fantastic thing that I've found to be the case in doing the work that I do is I hear a lot of people say, well, minorities, they don't seek out services anymore, but I have not found that to be the truth. I've found that probably the best candidates for behavior therapy are often well-educated African Americans who don't have any qualms about bearing their soul in the therapy process. And so I tell them that as far as I'm concerned, it's all about privacy, but it's also about a sacred trust. We do have available online behavior therapy that they can take advantage of, and but we start out with a face-to-face kind of approach. So they usually present themselves. They're self-referrals is what they are. Occasionally I'll have parents who will make a referral, and then I'll work with the parent to make sure that the client gets medical clearance if necessary, and then we proceed with a comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. We have a caller that's calling in
Yes.
right now.
Yes. Hello, you all. Very good program. My question is about Golden. Tell me, do you have to be a Georgia resident to apply for the program?
For the Victims Compensation Program, no, you do
Yes,
not.
ma'am.
There are actually comparable programs throughout the country, but all that is required is that the incident happened in Georgia in order for you to be eligible.
That is so good. And one more, please.
Sure.
Where do the funds come from?
The
Please.
funds are not from taxpayer dollars. They're actually from fines and fees that are generated when someone has been convicted of a crime and the
Yes,
judge allows them to be out on parole or probation. Then they are assessed fines and fees, and a portion of that goes into this fund. We also, I think, I didn't mention the DUI memorial that we also provide funding for. So if you have a loved one who's been tragically killed in connection with a DUI, we will actually have a sign erected at the scene to honor your loved one.
Thank you. And also, speaking about mental health for only a minute, is there ever a opportunity for the victim to speak to the perpetrator? What do you think?
That's typically something that the court would determine.
Yes, ma'am.
Usually, as part of the sentencing process, the judge will allow the victims to come and have a victim statement during that portion of the process.
Well, thank you very much. Great show. I'm going to keep on watching.
Oh,
thank
you
Bye-bye.
so much.
All right, thank you. Now, getting back to Dr. Griffin. Now, you mentioned something about the program or the event that's taking place on April the 28th. Can you give us more details about where it's located and how victims would be able to get in touch with you, or individuals who are in need of support and resources?
Okay, we're in the process of nailing down we actually have the location confirmed. We have the date confirmed, which is, I believe it's a Thursday from 6 to 8. But if they want information about the actual location and kind of overview, they can go to the Joshua Generation Care and Consultant Services LLC webpage, and we're going to be having information. That'll probably be in about a week before that information is up on the webpage. But that's where they can get more details about the location and so on and so forth. But what it's going to do is we are actually going to be describing what it's like, what the diagnosis, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 characteristics of these perpetrators is like for narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths and so on and so forth. And so once we explain to them what the characteristics are, then they'll be in a better position to be able to kind of protect themselves in terms of understanding, wow, if I see this person in my life, then I guess I need to back up. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So that's one of the things that we'll do. And then the other part is we're going to be providing some videos of some individuals who are kind of experts as far as their personal lives are concerned, dealing with some of these people. And so this one individual, his sister was a narcissist, and then two of his previous girlfriends were narcissists. And so, yes, and so he's going to talk about how to manage those relationships and how to deal with people who have this disorder. And then after that, we're going to go into therapeutic mode, where we will actually explore ways to go about healing from a behavioral point of view. And then we'll switch off in the second hour, and then we'll expose the second group to the same kind of thing. It's going to be two different groups. We'll be breaking out into small groups, and then they'll be able to explore and support each other from a therapeutic point of view. Now, all of the people who are going to be conducting the therapeutic process are licensed individuals such as myself. And so that's basically what it's going to be. The interesting thing about it is that many therapists don't really have an intimate, up close and personal understanding of what these disorders consist of. They read it in their abnormal psychology class or something like that. But when you really talk to people who have been through the mill with this thing, it's a truly devastating kind of an experience. So we want the community to be more aware of the fact that 1 in 25 individuals might be a narcissist. So you might go to Kroger's and you might see several of them and not even know it.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Now, the other thing that came to mind as you were speaking is the therapy process. Now, how difficult is it to go through the therapy process and the victim is still in a very difficult place with maybe a relative or a sibling, or even a relationship that they still want to stay in?
Well, the sad part of it is that many times survivors are addicted to the abuse. And so, yes, they want to stay in the relationship. And it's very, very difficult for them to get past this abuse, this addiction to the individual, because they're targeted by these people very often in order for the people to get what it is they want out of the relationship. Now, some of the clients or survivors that I've worked with, they have already gone through a counseling and behavior therapy process, and they're coming to me to find out what's the next step as far as dealing with this individual that's still in my life. And so typically what the professionals recommend in situations like that is for the person to run in the other direction as fast as possible. So, but because we believe in a faith-based kind of an approach, we believe in miracles, and so we do what we can.
We're going to take this call right now. Excuse me. Yes.
Yes. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, hi. I can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Okay. I really love your show. I had just two basic questions. Wanted to know what is a narcissist? That's the first thing, because I'm just tuning in. And I also wanted to find out, is your panel in the doctor that is holding this very needed session, is this for just behavioral deficiencies, if you will? Is it just for a narcissist, whatever that is, or is it just for behavior destruction? It sounds like what they're trying to tackle for these victims. And is it for the victim of the narcissist, or is it for the narcissist itself? I'm kind of a little confused, and I wanted to know that. And my very second question and last question is, for the victim, do you give any kind of legal assistance to, if you still have like an open case or what have you, to actually bring closure to the victim? I just wanted to know that. Thank you so much. I love your panel and discussion. I would like to know a little bit more about when they're holding the class, depending on if it's the victim or the narcissist that they're assisting. Thank you.
Well, as far as the victim's compensation program, if the person is a victim of domestic violence, we will compensate. You can get up to $3,000 for counseling benefits, and it's probably one of the most underutilized parts of our program, and we'd like to see it be more utilized, because in many instances, until that person is able to get the proper counseling, they can't move forward and they can't move beyond that situation. And we really want our victims to be overcomers and not trapped in that cycle.
Okay, in answer to the question, I'm not sure where to start first, but I'll start with who are the clientele. And she asked the question, is it the narcissist or is it the survivor or the victim of the narcissist? But in actuality, it's often both. Narcissists don't run to therapy, only because they had this perfect sense of self. They had this overblown ego and so on. Now, the interesting thing about who is a narcissist or what is a narcissist is the fact that in the popular media, the whole idea of definition of a narcissist is very much incorrectly portrayed, okay? So a lot of people think that if you're talking about a narcissist, it's somebody who loves themselves, somebody who looks in the mirror all the time, they dress real snappy. And so, you know, it's not unusual for doctors, not just making jokes, to be accused of being a narcissist. But in actuality, narcissists don't love themselves, they hate themselves, okay? They have this inner void that they feel by destroying other people's lives. And so they seek out people like yourself who have a light, okay? Somebody who has a spiritual glow to themselves, an aura, okay? And they try to feed off of that, you know? So a person who is, say, well-known in the community or an upstanding kind of person, they know they don't have that, so they feed off of your energy, is what they do. And so there's two things that they seek out. They seek out positive reinforcement or reward through compliments and praise and adulation, things like that. Or the alternative is, you ever see people who are like a tornado, everywhere they touch down, it's a big mess, you know what I'm saying? That's the second source. They call it narcissistic supply. So either they want to keep things stirred up in chaos, especially in families and so on, or they want constant kind of there being the center of the universe. So it's very difficult to change this false sense of self that they portray to people. It's very difficult because it's a kind of ingrained portion of their personality at that point. But what I do most often is work with the survivors to help them to regain their sense of self and to be a whole, well-rounded person.
I think the caller touched a little bit on the emotional trauma services in April. She talked a little bit about what is that like and what to expect from that.
Okay, well, I think they'll probably get a little bit of a smattering of a behavioral approach or a cognitive behavioral approach to regaining themselves that I talked about. And so some of it would be teaching them ways to manage their thought process. And so there's various behavioral techniques like thought stopping, cognitive restructuring, and so on and so forth. But essentially what it means is that people learn how to monitor what's going through their brain. you know how sometimes people will say, you answer to what people call you or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So in other words, just to say you call me a monkey or something like that. Well, if I answer to it, then, yeah, I guess I am one, But the whole process is teaching them to become aware and noticing what's going on. Because a lot of people work on autopilot, and they've been doing it for decades and decades. And so you have family members or an intimate partner telling them, you're nothing, you'll never be anything, I wish you weren't born, or whatever. And so they internalize those feelings with the narcissist. And so what we do is reprogram them, help them to reprogram themselves in a team effort in order to learn how to be more functional and how to be more capable in their jobs, at school, in the intimate relationship or whatever, and to recognize that they never did anything to deserve that they're good people, and so they deserve the best in life.
Oh, great. Now, you touched a little bit earlier on the Violence Prevention Summit. Can you give us more information about that service?
We're going to be having people who are flying in from Chicago. One example is Dr. James Garbarino of Loyola University, and he is a national expert on violence and violence prevention. And so he's going to be talking a lot about gang violence prevention methods. He's one of the authors of the book that was written, I guess it was back in late 2000s, Lost Boys. He's the author of that. But we're also going to be having, I believe, District Attorney Paul Howard is going to be speaking to the whole issue of gang violence prevention. Also, Cedric Alexander, the Director of Public Safety for DeKalb County, is going to be there to talk about it. We're going to have a variety of breakout sessions that will focus on these evidence-based approaches to violence prevention. I myself am going to be working with the Metropolitan Atlanta Violence Prevention Partnership, some of the parties who are a part of that, and they're going to be talking about the work that they do. Like, for example, this Gwendolyn Sands with Visions Unlimited is going to be talking about Thinking for a Change, which is a violence prevention curriculum that has a behavioral foundation. Everything we're doing is trying to focus on, I hate to use the term, programs that are not Mammy-made or shoot from the hip, but actually have some national notoriety and a research foundation to them. Not to say that that's the end-all, be-all to everything, but we want the community to be able to partake of these evidence-based approaches, and also to learn how to find these violence prevention strategies and techniques online. So we'll be sharing a toolkit that has access to some of these programs, such as Sankofa is one of the programs. It's an African-American, well-tested violence prevention approach that people can just take off the shelf and use in communities.
And I think it is critical to have evidence-based programs, because there are proven programs that have been shown to work, and that if you know it's going to be effective, then that's the better route to go.
That's why I love her.
Mm-hmm. So some of these individuals that will be participating in the Violence Prevention Summit will provide some great needed services for those victims that are suffering from many different situations. Now, this toolkit that you mentioned that's online that they'll be able to utilize, how would that help them overcome a lot of the issues that they're having in their life?
Well, one of the ways would be to identify specific resources that they can take advantage of in order to deal with trauma or the violence in their lives. So that's one of them. But also, we want to deal with both prevention and intervention, and in the case of gangs, suppression of violence. So those kinds of resources where they can gain access to these evidence-based approaches that the young lady just mentioned will be a part of the toolkit. And so we've already kind of begun to amass the items that are involved in the toolkit. But what we want to do is to the degree possible, make those PDFs or that will be available on the Morehouse School of Medicine webpage.
I see. Now, is there a particular type of individual that is more susceptible to becoming a part of a gang or becoming a part of a violent group? Is there a particular character or a particular situation that they may have gotten involved in their earlier life that would promote this type of behavior?
Well, I used to serve as the evaluator for the Visions Unlimited Serious Violent Offenders Program. And basically, my response to that, my feeling is that anyone in this room, anyone in the audience could become a perpetrator. And so it's kind of like but for the grace of God go I is how it works. So under the right conditions, anyone can become violent, and anyone in a particular neighborhood could, be forced to become part of a gang, because a lot of times it's for family affiliation with the gang or protection. So they don't have any choice often.
Okay. Yes. I have a question from the audience.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is James Berry with Citizens Involved in Changing Human Exploitation. I have a question about the Violence Summit. Will you be addressing the economic stagnation that some of the young men may be suffering from their parents as well, that could be causing some of the violence? Do you guys have plans on maybe helping them with a entrepreneurship track or something to give them an opportunity to market something else other than violence?
Well, one of the long-standing approaches that we've been advocating for since 2005 as far as violence prevention is exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we definitely would like to advocate for entrepreneurial ventures, business ventures, and provide youth with alternatives to, selling drugs on the corner or, that kind of thing. So, to the degree that we can facilitate that kind of an approach, we're definitely behind it. And I consider that to be one of the evidence-based approaches too, because you can't just take things away from them. You have to provide something for them as far as alternatives for living a full and productive life. And so entrepreneurship, certainly, especially in the city of Atlanta, is the way to go.
Oh, thank you. Now, getting back to Ms. Bunn, now with your organization, there are many people who are having issues with domestic violence or being in sex trafficking and rape and other types of violent crimes. How is it that this organization is going to continue to help them overcome a lot of the things that they've went through in their lives and sustain them so that they can go on to live the life that they deserve to live?
Well, I think the goal of the compensation program is to essentially meet the victim at their point of need. I know that there are instances where the economic support that's provided may be the difference between someone being able to remain in their home,
right,
or not. The money that's paid towards the providers who have provided medical services will be the difference between a medical provider harassing you about a bill. And when you're going through a traumatic event, the less of that kind of stress that you have, the better off you are. And so again, we're trying to meet victims at the point of their need. We compensate for forensic medical exams. We also compensate for forensic interviews. So if there's a child and there's a possibility that this child has been a victim of sexual molestation, we provide the cost for that forensic interview so that they can determine whether some action should be taken against the perpetrator.
Now, I think education is so important, and when individuals are informed about what is available to them and how they can access it without worry or stress,
right,
it makes life so much easier for them. Now, is your organization going out to the community with educational workshops and being able to maybe understand what these people may need additional to what you're providing?
Well, we actually provide funding for a lot of sexual assault centers across the state of Georgia. We do conferences across the state because it is a statewide agency, and our goal is to help make sure that the people who are providing the services are receiving the proper training so that they can assist. We have advocates right within our office so that if someone were to fill out an application and they need assistance, there's someone there to help them complete that application process. We fund advocates in all of the district attorney's offices throughout the state so that there are advocates there to help them work through the process and understand the possible benefits that they can receive.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question from the audience.
I'm from Stone Mountain, Georgia. My name is Diane, and this question is for Ms. Bond, or Doctor, you can answer as well. I wanted to know, once the victim has completed the program and went through the help and the sessions that you offer them, do you follow up with the victim? Do you keep in touch with them, like, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do you just follow up, just to touch base with them to see how they're doing?
Well, Diane, I would say the Crime Victims Fund is basically a source for funding to cover the actual costs. How often they go would be determined by whoever the provider is, because we're actually just providing payment for the counseling services.
Okay, all right. And Doctor?
Now, as far as we're concerned, typically what's more often the case is that they follow up with us.
Okay.
So what they do is, like, I just recently received an email from an individual. Actually, it was the one where I was talking about they went over to see about the boyfriend. The boyfriend was a girlfriend, and turned into this big fracas on the front porch.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of her therapeutic process is learning how to let go of somebody that didn't fit. And so, we made a profile of and there's a lot of women, by the way, that I work with too, not just African-American males, but they're looking for that man. And so, she made this profile of who this individual was. And once she completed the therapeutic process, she wrote me the email back and she said, Dr. Griffin, I'm adding emotion to the email, but anyway, Dr. Griffin, I found that man. He was right there in my face and stuff. I didn't even know. And I'm like, go ahead, girl, shoot, but yes, that would be more often the case, that we don't necessarily, because I have people coming in all the time, and I'm doing the intakes, plus I do other things as well, like program evaluation and educational consulting and so on and so forth. So, it's kind of difficult to be initiating those calls, but I do that too. Sometimes I do. So I'll send them an email and say, hey, what's up? How's things going? And then they'll tell me, well, this happened and that happened, and they put me out of this and they put me out of that, but I'm able to raise up and be successful anyway. This is young males in particular tell me stuff, because they feel a sense of bondedness with me, and that I'm in their corner, because I am. So that's what happens.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My next question is for Dr. Griffin. Can you tell us what a day-to-day treatment program looks like for someone who is a victim and they're having issues with attachment with a relative? It could be a parent or it could be a husband. What does this look like? What does the treatment look like? How long is this treatment, and what will be the long-term goal for this person after the treatment?
Okay, well, I could describe it like this. The process starts out with a intake evaluation, and the whole purpose of the intake evaluation is to get a lay of the land in terms of what are the factors that are operating in that person's life that we need to address. So I tell them that, I'm forming a team with them, and that I don't tell them how to live their lives, because most often, even with the 17-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever, I'm like, you're a grown man, you're a grown woman, or whatever. And so, individuals who try to give advice to people, which is usually the families, and very often it's the wrong advice, they're usually a hack. They're not professionally trained, and so they don't really understand that, no, it's not about giving people advice. And people feel inclined to do that because they love the people. They don't want to see them crash and burn and things like that. So what we do is we examine alternatives given where they want to go. So it's not about what I want to happen with their life, but where do you want to go? So once we determine that, then we start to examine what these alternatives are. And then I draw on my little bag of behavioral therapy tricks to help them to move in that direction. So there's not a lot of people who are trained officially in behavior therapy techniques. There's a lot of counselors out there, and they can be very beneficial. I'm not saying that at all, but the behavior therapy kinds of approaches are the ones that are shown to be most effective very often. And so a lot of times it doesn't take years and years and years and laying on the couch. In fact, I've had clients that come in who actually wanted to lay on the couch because they had this idea that, you know, that's what they were supposed to do. I'm like, no, we don't lay in couches here. But I work with them and we explore situations. We explore what are the situations, the behaviors, and the consequences of those behaviors that seem to be most troubling with them. And I tell them that what I'm going to do is teach you how to become a Sherlock Holmes of your own behavior. And then once you do that, then you can begin to manage those conditions and the behaviors and the consequences of them so that they can begin to ride the bike for the rest of their lives. Once you learn how to ride the bike, you keep on riding that bike for the rest of your life, and you don't have to figure out what your relationship was with your mama and things like that, like back in the day.
Haven't there been a lot of studies, though, that talk about the impact of trauma, and that the earlier someone experiences something very traumatic, the more impact it's going to have long term?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variation in that, and some of it has to do with the degree of the trauma, you know. So, and the other part of it that comes into play is the temperament of the individual. So I'm sure you've seen people probably in your family or in your community who, you know, people have had the whole book thrown at them as far as, you know, abuse and misuse and maltreatment. Same family, same situation or whatever, but one person ends up completely and totally traumatized and the other person just, you know, dusts themselves off and they keep moving, you know. But in the case of the individuals who are survivors, those are the ones who can learn how to reinvent themselves, how to redesign who they are, and that's what we do. We teach them skills for redesigning, reshaping who they are through these cognitive behavioral techniques. But I also recognize I don't know everything, and I'm not trying to. So I will make referrals to dietitians. I will make a referral for medical clearance with a physician or for an exercise physiologist if necessary. Whoever it takes in their situation, if they're having sleep problems, I'll make a referral for that. Whatever and another thing is if there's a situation where they're having problems with substance abuse, in one case, I'm like, you have to be involved in a 12-step program or some kind of group program for treatment of your substance abuse. I'll deal with the mental health part, but you know, you have to be involved in following your treatment plan. So, but to your question, I would say in general that early trauma would be more devastating than later in life, because by that time you have picked up on some skills for learning how to manage your environment, things like that. So,
okay, we have a question from the audience.
Hi, my question is for Ms. Bonds. In reference to domestic violence, someone who's not yet a victim, but they're afraid of becoming a victim based on their spouse's behavior, do you have any places that they can go or anywhere they can receive funds for maybe perhaps leaving or getting away because the spouse is always holding on to the children?
Right. There are shelters and there are programs out there. And I would say you need to get with an advocate to work through it, because the one thing you definitely need is a plan. You definitely have to have a plan if you're going to remove yourself from that situation.
So are there any funds that they can apply for to help them?
The Crime Victims Compensation Fund is actually to cover actual expenses related to violence. So we don't cover costs like relocation costs, those kinds of things, not in Georgia.
There's something I need to add in response to your question. I don't mean to be jumping in.
Well, you are the professional.
Right. But I just recently had a client who was in that situation, and he actually had done a little bit. He took his hands and he slammed his hands on either side of her head or that kind of thing, because once it starts moving in that direction, it can't get any better. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about was you need to think about, it's not just about you, it's about your children. Okay, so that's part of it. But what I did was I referred her to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and I called it first just to make sure that it's going to be something that's going to be beneficial, because I don't like referring people to half-baked opportunities. So I called, and they said that they would help her to actually work through the kind of plan that you're talking about.
And identify some place that
Exactly, yeah. And to identify some shelters that are close to her, and just kind of work through a complete approach that's going to fit her situation.
So I have one more question for the doctor. Women, they have a pattern of getting involved with persons with narcissistic attitudes or
personality disorder,
Tendencies.
NPD.
So how do you give them therapy so that they won't continue that pattern, or their kids will not continue the pattern that their mother had?
Good question.
That's a very good question. Well, one of the things, there's a couple things. There are some evidence-based curricula out there that, one's called Safe Dates. And what it does is it teaches youth what constitutes a healthy relationship. So that's one thing as far as prevention is concerned. But as far as intervention is concerned, working with people who over and over keep being attracted to violent perpetrators or emotional abusers, is teaching them what the signs are of a potentially emotionally abusive individual. And so if you run across someone who, this is really interesting, but first they target you, okay? And so they do what they call love bombing. And so, you're the best thing since buttered bread until you fall in love. And then at that point, the mask comes off and then they become the devil, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So when you see somebody who is not interested in your conversation and it's always about them, and they don't really care how you feel, and they're giving you the cold shoulder all the time, and there's a lot of other things that are associated with it, then those are red flags. Usually, once you fall in love, the red flags, you ignore them because I'm in love. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's how the woman keeps getting attracted over and over, and then she gets addicted to this dude. And the other thing about it is there's women who are narcissists as well, okay? And there's guys out there who are as much addicted as the women to these women who, it's just that the women are a little bit more crafty about the approach that they use to abuse people. So, it's not just about teaching the ladies, it's about teaching the guys sometimes too. And there are women who will pick up a statue or a bottle or whatever, and there's been situations where they've stabbed guys, a karate black belt. He's not going to hit her. He said, I will not hit her because of my training. You know what I'm saying? So it's looking for the signs of, what constitutes an abusive individual. And once you learn that, then you know where to get your running shoes.
And if you're in the situation, being wise as you try to remove yourself from the situation, because one of the most dangerous times is when you're trying to pull away.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
It could be very dangerous.
Thank you very much.
Now, my next question is for Ms. Spahn. With all of the victims that are out there that are struggling with, coming forward and getting help, what would be, again, the best way for them to get in contact with your organization so that they will have a peace of mind?
I'd say the easiest way to reach us would be to go to the website, which is www.cjcc.ga.gov. It has all the contact phone numbers, addresses. You can download all the forms, applications, and last year we gave out more than $19 million for victim services, and I think we'd love to do more. And we are hoping, we are on a very aggressive plan working with a marketing company to try to get the word out there. I'm doing this show tonight because I want people to know that these resources are out there, and it's important for them to take advantage of it because it's there for you. And the state of Georgia does care about victims.
Thank you.
Now, for the Morehouse School of Medicine
Yes.
that's taking place
Yes.
Yes.
on April the 6th, they can go to the Morehouse School of Medicine webpage, and they can find more details about violence prevention events that are taking place on that day.
Okay, and if there are victims that fit some of those characters that you mentioned earlier that are in need of additional support, how do they get in contact with you?
Okay, the best way to get in contact with Dr. James Parker Griffin Jr. is to go to the Psychology Today therapist referral page, and they will see they'll see my picture, they'll see my profile, they'll see the approach that I use that I'd already described, that is forming a team with individuals. And as I say, I tend to concentrate on working with African American males, like 17 to 48. But I also work with entertainers, and I'm interested in working with athletes, politicians, and other professionals. I work with some professionals, like in the medical field, for example, things like that. So, yeah, they can go to the Psychology Today webpage, therapist referral page, and look up my name, Dr. James Parker Griffin Jr. Joshua Generation Care and Consultant Services is the organization, and we'll be more than happy to serve them. We accept a variety of insurances too, by the way. So that includes Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, Cigna, TRICARE, Humana TRICARE, AmeriGroup, and Coventry, and a number of insurances.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you again, Ms. Jacqueline Bond and Dr. Griffin, for our show, After the Headlines, What About the Victims, Part 2. Thank you.